welcome to Crash Test Diva. I'm your host, Christy. This is a special bonus episode of our show. It actually started as a segment, but as we recorded, we discovered we had way too much content. Since launching my podcast, I've heard from many of you that you've never listened to a podcast before. You're new to this world of podcasting. With nearly 250,000 shows on nearly any topic you can possibly imagine, it can be overwhelming. I thought it would be helpful to have Liza Atkinson join me. The two of us have taken many podcasts for test drives. I thought we could share some of our favorite podcasts and podcast listening apps with you. Welcome back, Liza.
Hello, hello.
First of all, we're going to start with podcast listening apps. Now, iPhone always comes with an app. People are sometimes unaware of it, the podcast app.
Right.
However, tell me about your feelings with the podcast app.
I loathe the Apple Podcast app that comes on your phone. Now, granted, if you are new and this is it's the only way for you to listen and that's all you figured out, you go with your bad self. But if you are irritated, like Christy and I are, aren't you, by that app?
I am. Yeah, and I think, to your point, if people are new and they're only listening to one or two podcasts,
it's fine.
It's manageable.
Totally.
But with us, because we listen to quite a few, it's tough to navigate.
Once you start loading up your library with multiple podcasts, it's hard to find, and then you miss a new episode. It's just not very user-friendly when you're listening to lots of podcasts like we do.
And I think they used to be, from what I've read and heard on some, because I listen to a lot of podcasts about podcasting, it used to be perfect. It used to be great. But I think with some updates in the past 6-9 months, it kind of, and if I think back to, I used to listen to it all the time, use that app. Everything got kind of knocked out and the notes section became really hard to navigate. It was just a pain. So there are some great apps. Now, which is your favorite to use?
I really like Stitcher.
Okay, so now the good thing about Stitcher is just not for iOS Apple users.
Right.
It's Android.
It's for Android too. Yeah. So I use Stitcher both on my computer and on my iPhone. And then I've also heard, I haven't used it, I've also heard Overcast is good. Have you used Overcast?
That's my favorite. Yep.
Okay.
I think the it's really visually pleasing and the notes are super easy and they hyperlink where you have hyperlinks in the notes and I love it. It's a free app. Now, is Stitcher free? I can't remember.
Stitcher's free, yep.
Yeah. So both of those are free. Now, another thing, people who maybe, this is going to sound crazy, but let's say you have a TV with a Roku or an Apple TV set up in an area where you listen to things. We are actually on YouTube. So you can actually listen to our podcast on YouTube if you want to listen through a device like that.
Yeah, and we have Amazon Alexas, and you can listen to, so I do that a lot in the kitchen when I'm cooking. I'll just ask Alexa to turn on, whatever podcast. And
well, it's interesting that you say that because I just tested it, and so they say that you have to say the following, because you can only listen to the latest episode. So I'm just going to do a little test here because it worked when I was just testing it.
Okay.
Alexa, play the latest episode of the Crash Test Diva podcast.
Getting the latest episode of Crash Test Diva. Here it is from TuneIn.
Oh,
So it works. I know.
Yeah.
Alexa, stop. Is that great or what? So people who have an Echo or a Dot can listen to the latest episode. I heard there's some workarounds to listen to previous episodes, but that'll work for that. So there you go. Those are our recommendations. I'm going to link to all of them in the show notes, or I should say Josie will link to all of them in the show notes.
Okay.
God bless Josie. Okay, so I had a list that was, because I went through and I think I have 50 different podcasts that I listen to, and people
On the reg?
Well, I mean, like I have them and maybe don't always. I mean, there's some that I listen to weekly, and that's probably 8. People need to also think about when to listen to podcasts, because I think people get overwhelmed when they hear that. When you're folding laundry, when you're doing the laundry. I love it because it's like I put my iPhone in my back pocket and I have it on speaker mode. I don't even deal with headphones if I'm alone. And you walk around with this little boombox in your pocket, if you will. So that's one thing. And then when you're driving, but when you're driving, you can listen over your sound system.
Yeah, driving's like when I want to binge. So there
Yeah.
are certain podcasts that are, I think, better for binging, meaning that there's a story sequence that's being told.
Yeah.
And those are great for car rides. And I like to do it when I'm cooking dinner and my kids are fighting a lot. I just kind of want to tune them out.
Do you put the headphones in then for that?
I do. Yeah,
Okay,
I put the
that's
headphones
nice.
in and, we just make it work. So,
And as I've mentioned, I love to listen to them when I take walks. So
Yeah,
that's
me
where I
too.
also listen to them. So those are our advice for when and how to listen. But let's talk about what we're listening to. So you want to? Do you have about 5? What'd you do?
I
'Cause
do.
were you
I
able
did
to name it to?
5. I did. I narrowed it down to 5.
I
It was
narrowed it down to
hard.
5, and I tried to do ones that I didn't think you were already going to be doing. But let's see how we
Same.
go. You want to start?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So my first 3 are all, I'm an entrepreneur, so I do listen to a lot of business podcasts. So my first 3 are all about business, and specifically lady bosses. So my first one is Goal Digger, Goal Digger, with Jenna Kutcher, and she is an entrepreneur. She is a wedding photographer in Wisconsin, and she also does a lot of online courses like on Instagram and building your email marketing list. And she's just really wicked smart about what she does, and she's very successful at it, and she has a lot of guests on. And she just started her podcast a year ago. And it's already, I think, over 1 million downloads.
Wow.
So it's been really successful for her. And I always learn something. There's always nuggets of info in there for me, even though I'm not a wedding photographer. She just really speaks
Okay.
to small business owners and lady bosses really well.
Okay.
Her voice is sometimes a little Kardashian-esque, so I'm just going to give a heads up that sometimes she's a little...
Tell our listeners what you said when we were kind of doing a little intro. You and I were talking briefly. What did you say about voices on podcasts?
Well, sometimes it's funny because I always relate this to childbirth. So sidebar, when we were pregnant and I was interviewing for a doula to be in the room with us, someone said to me, make sure you can handle the sound of her voice, because when you're in labor, if that voice irritates you, like there's nothing
is so
worse,
funny.
right?
Well, and
which
you
is
and
so
I-
true.
Yeah.
But it's the same with podcasts. If you're spending hours listening to someone talk, you want their voice to not irritate the hell out of you.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because you and I used to listen to a podcast. I don't think either of us listen to it anymore. We're going to,
No.
it will remain nameless.
Anonymous. Mm-hmm.
But one of the hosts, we just said, I can't listen anymore. It was terrible. Now there's one, speaking of voices, I think, should we go back and forth in terms
Yeah,
of
sure.
sharing?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of voices, and this wasn't on my actual list, but I'm just going to mention it, is a program produced up in Canada called Someone Knows Something, and it's a mystery. And it's pretty good, but you have to be willing to listen to a Canadian accent because the host has a thick Canadian accent. So I know people think we have accents, but wow.
We do.
Theirs is a little bit more severe than
a
ours.
boat.
So anyway, that's just a sidebar. I'm going to start with a different mystery that I absolutely love. And it came from your friend. I think your friend Nora shared this with me one night when we were out. And her husband listened to it. And it's called Up and Vanished. And the first season was about a young teacher, a former beauty queen, who vanished from a small town in Georgia about 10 years ago. And so this guy, he used to be, I think, a documentary film producer, takes a podcast and kind of tries to uncover it. I think we should back up, because if we have first-time podcast listeners, we should talk about one of the first ones that really caught fire, and that was Serial. Mm-hmm. And you and I went and heard the producers speak on Serial. Do you want to tell the listeners? Because I strongly recommend, if people are new to podcasting, start with Serial.
Serial, and if you can handle some foul language, S-Town. Those two they're riveting. You can't stop listening. It's like when you read a really good book and all you want to do is turn the page. I would say both of those podcasts are like that.
Right.
They're both really well produced by National Public Radio. But the first one, Serial, is about a guy who may or may not have killed his girlfriend.
When he was in high school.
In the Baltimore area when he was in high school. And he's a Muslim man, and it's fascinating. I mean, the research they put into both of those podcasts is just, I'm in awe.
Amazing. Yeah. So I totally recommend start with something like that.
Yeah. And that continues to be, Serial continues to be the most downloaded podcast of all time. So,
Right.
I mean, it's...
And you do
it's
need
up there.
you need to start at episode 1, people, and go right through. It's chronological. So
Yep.
so let's just start there. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I said Up and Vanished. That we talked
Okay.
about Serial. You talked
Yep.
about
Gold Digger.
Gold Digger. GOAL Digger.
Yep.
Okay.
Gold Digger. Yep.
Give me your number
next
2.
one is called Dais, Dais, and it's by Rachel Hollis. And she is kind of a media mogul. She owns her own media company out in Los Angeles. She's a blogger. She's an Instagram influencer. She is a motivational speaker. She's brilliant and cute as a button. But she talks about how she's built this company. She has a high school diploma and a Google search bar. And she has like self-made, self-taught everything and has come from hard circumstances. She had a rough childhood, and she just is super inspirational. She has great guests on her podcast. They're always around 30 to 45 minutes, so they're pretty short. But she's an author. She just is one of those people, like, you just want to be in her energy, in her space, because she's so positive and so goal-oriented and just really good at what she does. And I always learn something.
Now, let me ask you this. With both your first 2, is it something that you can just pop in anytime, pick a topic,
Yes.
and you don't have to, doesn't matter
Nope.
if you go in chronological order?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My second one is very lighthearted, and it's called Satellite Sisters. And my sister Annie and I used to listen to this program locally. It was a radio show on FM 107. And when they changed their format around a few years back, they quit carrying this nationally syndicated 2 or 3 hour show. And we loved it. So we were super bummed out. And just recently we discovered that they are still doing podcast. And it is fabulous. It's 3 sisters who live all around the country in various stages of their life, and they talk about current events. They give some little tips. It's just a lot of fun. So, and it's about an hour long, and it's once a week. And I say it's a great little escape. Very light, very light.
Yeah.
Kids in carpool appropriate too.
Okay, good to know. My third one is How I Built This, which is produced by National Public Radio, and they're a half hour long, but it's an interview with a business owner and how they created something. So like Sarah Blakely, who created Spanx. So it's a half hour about how'd she get the idea, how'd she do it. It's the owner of Five Guys. It's the creator of, all these brands that we know and love now, but at some point they were just beginning and they became bankrupt in the process, or, it's just fascinating to kind of get behind the scenes of how they did it. And, did they sell the company? Did they make millions? Do they still own their company? Just kind of behind the scenes. And again, they're a half hour. They're really short, but
you can pop in at any episode.
Any
Okay.
episode. I just find it fascinating. The creators of Instagram, like, how did you come up with the idea and how did it take off so quickly? And it's just, I don't know. I just find them really interesting and fascinating to hear other people's success stories.
I will have to check that one out.
Yeah.
Okay, you and I'm laughing because we're taking very different paths with our favorites, but I think that's good. Variety is the spice of life.
Right. Yeah.
My next one is produced locally, or it was produced locally, and they've just got 1 season. I know they're in season 2 production. It's called In the Dark, and season 1 was absolutely amazing. It was an in-depth look at the investigation of the Jacob Wetterling case, and it was, you're right, it was heavy. It was heavy, but I'm telling you, fascinating, in-depth reporting on how the investigation was handled. So if you want to check something like that out, again, you need to go in chronological order with that one. So that I have a theme to mine. I got a lot of mysteries over here.
Mysteries.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to switch it up. My next one is not business oriented. This is For the Love with Jen Hatmaker. I've mentioned her before. She is an author. Her and her husband, Brandon, they live in Austin, and they are both ministers and have in the last year gotten some serious death threats and flack because they've come out saying as evangelicals that they don't believe that the church should discriminate against gay people. And they have really had to take a left turn from the church that they grew up in. And they've been very open and honest and brave about their journey and kind of their process getting there. They really don't think God cares if you're gay or not. And
wow, this is fascinating. What's the
yeah?
Okay,
they both are fascinating. But Jen
is it like a half hour?
Hers are like half hour, 45 minutes. So she doesn't talk a lot about that. She had a book come out this year called Of Mess and Moxie. She's an author. She's written lots of books. But she's one of those people that you just want to be her girlfriend. And so her entire podcast is about girlfriends. So, and they'll have a theme. So she'll do 5 episodes where it's, for the love of football and fall entertaining. And she'll have some of her favorite people on who are really great at that. Or for the love of girlfriends and relationships. And so again, they're like 45 minutes usually. She interviews somebody. She's kind of an Oprah in terms of you just like you want to be her friend and you feel like you're her friend, and she's kind of magical. I adore her.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that one out.
Very lighthearted. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm fascinated with this next program, and it's a drama, so it's produced, and it's like an old time radio show.
Oh,
so it's called Homecoming, and David Schwimmer is in it. David Schwimmer from Friends.
From Friends, Ross.
Right. It's produced by Gimlet. It's about soldiers returning home after, I believe it's the Iraq War, and they're being put through some top secret reentry program. So again, there's a mystery to it. Again, drama. Nothing, and it's scripted. So it's fun to hear all the character voices, and it really is like an old-time radio show. So check it out if you want to. It's a little escape. Yeah.
Yeah.
Story's a bit out there.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
With podcasts, as we're learning here, there's something for everyone. I'm telling you, it's like the library.
Absolutely.
My last one is hilarious. Completely not kid appropriate at all. There's so much cussing and swearing and inappropriate sexual. But it's called Two Dope Queens, and it's 2 African American women. They're comedians. They make me laugh out loud, pee my pants. Like, they are hilarious. They do stand up. They both act there in several shows and movies and whatnot. But they do stand up around the country. They just sit and kind of banter with each other, and then they have guests come on. But hilarious, Christy. Like, I've been in the car driving, back for work or stuff, from Madison to here, and I mean, it keeps me awake like nothing else in the car by myself. And they're just hilarious. They're about an hour each. And there's usually 3 or 4 other comedians, so that, the segments are like 10, 12 minutes long. They're little shtick, but I mean, so funny and so inappropriate.
Oh, I'm going to have to check that one out. You don't have to go, again, you can drop in anytime to check out an episode. You don't have to go.
Anytime.
Okay. Good. Okay. Well, now we are missing a big one. Neither of us have mentioned this because I think we thought the other person was going to mention it. And so since you introduced me to her, I'm going to let you mention it because we've gone through our list and I know we both love this podcast. So do you want to talk about it?
Well, it is with our girl, Nora McInerney. Terrible. Thanks for asking. So she is a local Minneapolis gal and wrote a book about, a couple of years ago, about within a 6-week period, her husband died, she had a miscarriage, and her dad died. And that's a lot of shit, as she says. And so she wrote a book about it, kind of that whole process. And then she has a podcast called Terrible, Thanks for Asking. And just about, like, life is hard and shit happens and you survive it, and how do you survive it? And
well, each week she takes basically somebody who's listened in and come forward to tell their kind of terrible, it's like that question you ask someone, how you doing? And you really want to say, I'm terrible, thanks for asking. Yeah. And so these people have written in about something that's kind of terrible in their life, and she does like a deep dive into that situation.
Yeah.
And she's got a beautiful way of telling their story each week. What I would say is it's deep, it's heavy. You're not going to want to binge this. There are times when you want to listen to this, and there are times you don't. But it is such beautiful storytelling. It's so well produced, and she's a very, very gifted writer. So I strongly recommend that one to people. And I'd say also with that one, it's all ages. My niece Josie, who's in college, she listens to that one religiously. I mean, that's on her weekly playlist. So it's really well done. And I strongly recommend the read. And again, you recommended it to me at a time when I needed to read that book, and it just so happened I think I stayed up all night long, and I wrote to you in the middle of the night, and I said, I got through this book. Thank you. It's just what I needed to read. And you said, oh, by the way, she's got a free book reading tomorrow night. You want to go with me? So fascinating. It was just so fun. So fun to see this woman. And we're making her sound, she's got a very lighthearted spirit.
She does, yes.
Yeah, so we should
But
point that
at
out.
the end of the day,
she's a very funny woman.
She is hilarious. If you don't follow her on Instagram, you should. But she just, whether she's writing or podcasting, she's a great storyteller. She just is.
Absolutely. So, well, my gosh, this segment went long. I don't even know if we're going to have any more segments on this show. Maybe this will be like a special episode. They now have bonus episodes in podcasts. I don't know if people have seen that.
I know.
I think maybe we're going to make this into a bonus episode because we talked so much. It's our first Crash Test Diva bonus episode. Okay, friend, thank you so much, because you've introduced me to many of these. I think you and my sister have introduced me to many of these. So thank you.
You're
and can't wait to have you on again, my friend.
Sounds good.
What do you do when the kids won't give you no slack?
That's it for our special bonus episode. We hope we have given you some ideas for podcasts you might want to explore. Many of the podcasts I listen to have been recommended by my friends. If you like listening to our show, please share it with one of your friends. It's very simple to do. In the listening app, you'll see a share button. In some cases, it's simply the word share, or in other cases, it's an icon of a square box with an arrow coming out at the top. Click any of these and text or email them to a friend. Explore all the different podcasts to find your own favorite show. It's kind of like finding your favorite pair of jeans. You might have to try on a few to find the one that fits best for you. We would love to hear about your favorites. Please weigh in on social media. We have all the links in the show notes. I would love to discover a new favorite show, a new podcast from one of you. On a different note, I want to thank you for being patient during the past month. The holidays have certainly disrupted our production schedule. I'm still trying to figure all this out, and I just want to thank you for being patient. We're really hoping to get back on track, releasing new episodes each week. As I said before, your input and feedback, well, it keeps us going. Remember, life is like a bruise. The harder you get hit, the more colorful and interesting it gets.